Good morning, everyone. My name is Gary Peel. I'm the Business Development Manager for Fortinet after Cloud for Africa. And with me today is John Ward, who is the Principal and Cloud SME for Fortinet Africa. Today, we're going to talk about how customers are looking at security in the cloud era and how Fortinet is seeing how security is obviously a huge component of cloud architecture, and of course, how important it is to do it correctly, and the challenges that customers are experiencing in this ecosystem today. So I guess we all know that cloud is a extremely important part of IT and how businesses are responding to market challenges and how they're winning new markets from a global perspective. Businesses are constantly having to respond to market and being agile in their approach. And CIOs and CTOs have been given a lot of this responsibility from the CEO in terms of technology and how technology can assist them in responding to events. CIOs and CTOs have been given at least two of the three most common CEO priorities from an agility perspective, time to market, and revenue acceleration. And all of this is possible by the advent of the public cloud. And we know that cloud spend is going to be increasing. Many customers are migrating at a rapid pace to the cloud, and that we can see with the acceleration in the public cloud spend. By 2025, we think that there's going to be $809 billion spent on public cloud. So we can see that cloud is important. We can see that cloud is going to be a top line item of spend for customers, and we see that it's not going to slow down. But the cloud is, of course, brings some challenges, and those challenges come with, if you're moving fast, it's very difficult to make sure that your governance and controls and security are in place. So with the mass migration of workloads to cloud, customers are also experiencing unprecedented amount of breaches, because although there are a lot of similarities between cloud infrastructure and on-prem data center from a core perspective, there are different configurations and you do things differently in the public cloud. And customers are battling with this new configuration and architecture that's basically causing a lot of human errors and mistakes, which lead to data breaches. So what does Fortinet see in terms of customer security trends and customer challenges in the marketplace? So we know that multi-cloud is here to stay. We know that there's an increase in the attack surface, and attackers don't think in silos. So those are the three characteristics or points that we are seeing customers battle with. So let's look at multi-cloud. The reason why customers are going multi-cloud is because all of these cloud platforms have different strengths. Microsoft is extremely strong in terms of Microsoft workloads. AWS is extremely strong in scaling, and they have the most the most mature platform when it comes to services. Google is very strong from a data perspective. So we've got customers consuming workloads in public cloud for different reasons. The challenge is that these cloud providers have different sets of policies when it comes to security. So now you've got the security teams having to look at different security policies across these multi-cloud platforms, each with their own little nuances in terms of how things are configured and secured, which is causing a huge bottleneck when it comes to security teams being involved in the cloud, in the public cloud. In terms of the increased attack surface, so traditionally, organizations just had to worry about their perimeter security inside their data center to control both their workloads as well as their users. However, today's reality is completely different. Applications and data have moved to the cloud, and it's another area that they need to protect, as well as users working outside of the network in a work from anywhere situation. This has caused the perimeter to be completely fragmented and have lots of additional entry points into the network, which of course has increased security's problem when it comes to protecting these workloads. And then the last thing is, attackers don't think in silos, yet many organizations do. And what we mean by that is that when it comes to attackers, they look at an environment holistically, and they don't look at individual systems. So organizations are putting point solutions and silos in place because it speeds up deployment. However, when it comes to an overall architecture, there are definitely holes in that are there to exploit by the attackers. We see attacks increasing in velocity because of this newfound complexity. Last year, a water treatment plant in Florida was attacked, and the criminals increased the amount of lime sitting in the water, which could have had an extreme effect on the local residents. Fortunately, it was picked up early, which stopped most of the damage being caused. And another example is hospitals. Globally, hospitals are being attacked at an unprecedented rate, which unfortunately is causing patient deaths. So, it's incredibly important to have a solid defensive posture, which eliminates silos and inefficiencies, both from a structure perspective, so organizing your internal structure, as well within the technology stack. And the number one reason is attackers don't think in those silos, so neither should you from a business perspective or from a technology perspective. So the reality for most organizations is a mix and match of solutions that are point solutions, and there's no overarching visibility or control. The network has become complex and distributed, and responding to these threats with these point solutions is becoming almost impossible for businesses. On average, enterprises have deployed 45 different security solutions across their network, making any sort of centralized management very, very difficult to control. Detecting these breaches and responding to cybersecurity incidences requires coordination, and you just don't get that coordination when you've got all these different point solutions. What tends to happen is there's complex workarounds, which delays the response. You constantly have to reconfigure devices that are upgraded. And with the shortage of security skills globally, this just puts an unnecessary burden on security teams, which ultimately leads in breaches and catastrophic data breaches and fines for organization. Despite all these challenges, it's still all too common for organizations to move first and then ask afterwards, how do we secure these environments and networks? What we think is security architecture needs a seat at the table when discussing application migrations or new projects in the public cloud. Security architecture needs to be considered right at the beginning in order to avoid the mess later that often happens. So how does Fortinet see this challenge unfolding? So we think the only way to control these environments and to stop the data breaches from happening is to have what we call a security mesh in place. The security mesh is built on three pillars. It's broad, it's integrated, and it's automated. So what benefits can organizations see when adopting a mesh? It's all centered around visibility, control, automation from an enforcement perspective. But succinctly put, it requires, or it provides organizations with deep visibility across all the edges, the ability to centrally manage distributed solutions that are out there. One of the more important things is consistent enforcement of policies. So having a consistent policy across this entire ecosystem puts security within the heart of the organization and architecture, which obviously is a huge benefit for reducing breaches and vulnerabilities. Third-party integrations for improved protection against known and unknown attacks. So we know that there's not one vendor that has all the answers from a security perspective. But what's super important is making decisions from a security vendor perspective that will allow you to integrate into a single pane of glass. And then, of course, automating actionable responses in hybrid environments is crucial and where we see customers needing to focus. All of these benefits result in improved attack response times, reduced workload for our overburdened security teams, and better visibility through a single pane of glass. So just changing to what the role of a security ISV is in the cloud. So we've spoken about the cloud market, but what are we seeing in the public cloud today? So we know that public cloud providers see this ISV play on top of their platform as incredibly important and a lucrative revenue stream for them. They're building out dedicated teams to work with ISV partners like ourselves in deploying bespoke solutions for customers on these public cloud platforms. So what we also know is that security is the second biggest ISV spend in marketplace behind analytics and data analytics in general. So why is it so important, or why do we see it as so important? Well, we know that there's a increased focus from public cloud providers to push ISV solutions on their marketplace because customers are wanting best-of-breed solutions to be deployed to protect their workloads on public clouds. The public cloud providers like AWS and Microsoft are extremely good at what they do. However, they're not experts in everything. So customers are wanting best-of-breed solutions. And that's because they're wanting to standardize on technology and automation across multi-cloud environments. So they want the same technology standards to look at their on-prem data center as well as their public cloud provider and use that mesh to control those ecosystems. The other important point is that cloud environments they start off being isolated. So customers move their dev test workloads into the public cloud, maybe some backup and DR, maybe some new applications that they're wanting to deploy. But eventually, what tends to happen is these public cloud platforms become integrated into the customer's data center because some data may reside inside the customer's environment, whereas front-end processing is in the cloud platform. And having that mesh to have that centralized control and visibility across the ecosystem is incredibly important. And I think lastly, because there's a global skill shortage from a security perspective, having security teams understand different security postures across all these different platforms is a real challenge, and quite frankly, unachievable at this stage. So they're wanting to consolidate that in order to standardize on the process. We're going to change the tune now, and I'm going to introduce John Ward, who is the principal of engineering in Fortinet and the Cloud SME. And I'm going to ask John a couple of questions, as he's heavily involved in talking with customers on a daily basis around security architecture and cloud deployments into the public cloud. Welcome, John.
Morning, Gary. Thanks for having me.
Cool. So, John, first question. Do you see security teams more involved in cloud migrations? I guess, as the business becomes more mature, so the need arises. But how prevalent are they when discussions first start happening?
Well, Gary, generally when a customer decides they're going to do something in the cloud, it is a different team completely that does the implementation. Generally is done by the guys that architect the application itself, which means the security experience of the team is very minimized. But more importantly, it's typically only when the environment needs to go into production and they start talking to the group risk people with GRC requirements that the security team then gets involved. And many times, people blame the security environment requirements for delaying the project. The problem is that, once you've designed something to work and it is working and now you've got to put it into production, then dismantle it again to put security in, it becomes a problem.
Right.
So generally the involvement is right at the end, which is, you're securing something that's already there as opposed to securing something by design.
Right. Thank you, John. So next question. We know what the benefits customers get from migrating to cloud around increased agility and speed to the market. In your opinion, how do customers balance moving fast but securely?
Well, this is a very broad question, Gary. If we have a look at what people are doing in the cloud, generally it's a workload either from an existing environment or it's a brand, what we call net new type application that's being deployed. The first thing that happens is the developers get frustrated by the turnaround times, i.e., I need to have a firewall change made. I need to check the security on this thing. I need to be able to make sure that what I'm using is safe in the environment. Many of the times, when the guy needs to push the go button, it requires a change control. So, to balance the moving fast but do it securely phenomenon, you need to be able to do automation. Things like, for example, when I go and push the deploy button, I'd like to have something that automatically looks to say, well, when I'm deploying this machine into this group, there's a tag. This tag can then be used by the firewall. The firewall then knows, okay, this is a guy who's got the privileges to deploy a machine. The machine is of type X, Y, or Z based on the tag. Here are policies to allow this to work. And by doing that, I wouldn't say as infrastructure as a code, because this is not generally build, this is during deploy. You have the ability to reduce the turnaround time from a couple of weeks to a couple of seconds, because the firewall will see that there's this new host, needs to be put into the load balancer. Load balancer needs access to query a database at the back end. If the guy has a privilege to deploy the machine and it's in the right place, then the firewall rules will be applied to that device. So that also then allows the customer to do it in an agile and scaled manner without the restrictions of the security requirements.
Right. Great. So, John, you touched on some of those motions in the previous question. The security team needing to align with a DevOps motion and be the DevSecOps part of it. Is this the answer for them being involved in the deployment pipeline and no longer bypassed?
100%, Gary. So one of the few things that take a lot of time is, vetting, for example, code that needs to be deployed into environment. How does your dev team vet the code? How have they checked for CVEs against the libraries and that sort of thing? And, one of the things to be aware of is that when you deploy your code into the cloud, you have to make it as secure as you can at the time of deployment. And as you well know, when you put code into an environment, within a couple of weeks, you could end up with a library that has a vulnerability. So what do? During your CI/CD stage, in other words, your continuous integration and deployment stage, in your pipeline, everyone talks about this left shift or shift left thing when they're deploying applications. It's important to check it then. It's important to make sure that you use libraries that are reputable. And then, of course, make sure that in your pipeline or CI/CD pipeline, you have something that can check that code before it goes into deployment. The other thing that needs to be done is while that code is in deployment, make sure that you can see the environments and, make sure that being in the cloud and you're doing containers and all sorts of crazy things like that, make sure that you've got visibility in that environment, i.e. I've got the ability to continuously evaluate what's in deployment and check against CVEs and check against bad configuration. As we've seen in the slides you showed previously, Gartner tells us that, majority of the breaches will occur because somebody hasn't been insightful in terms of what the configuration is. So it's got to be configuration management as well.
Brilliant. So John, you and I have spoken about the MageCart vulnerability and how that happened. I guess the fact that business units are given a lot of autonomy to do their own thing is part of the problem. And most of the breaches are based on custom config error. How can customers manage to reduce this risk, after the fact that they've deployed? So how do they get visibility into all of this?
So that typically falls into a tool that would be looking at cloud workload protection. The idea with the cloud workload protection is it looks at the environment. It's got the capability of going and, we were talking about MageCart earlier as well, to go and look at, for example, the S3 buckets. Is it publicly readable? That might be fine. Is it publicly read-writable? That is not fine. How many of my buckets are vulnerability prone? And of course, where are they? Just think about the consequences of having, your data breached, and it's a GDPR requirement that it's in a specific region. So at the end of the day, you'd need a tool that's capable of looking at the entire environment and doing some sort of, group compliancy and risk analysis.
Right. John, we've only got a couple of minutes left. So 2 last questions. Work from anywhere and cloud migrations, how have they impacted customer networks?
Radically, actually, because, one of the journey to the cloud, so-called beneficiary factors or benefiting factors is speed and agility. So if you're using a generic type VPN service to connect to the cloud, just bear it in mind, you connect to one place. Then from that one place, you have to connect to all the other places, which means you're backhauling your traffic again. In terms of getting this working efficiently, because you've got workloads in many clouds and on-premise because of the multi and the hybrid cloud, you need to use ZTNA, which directly connects to those workloads without VPN tunnels.
Excellent. And John, in 30 seconds, if you were a CISO, what is the one piece of advice you would give your colleagues?
Man, to do something that gives you visibility across the entire attack surface. And it can't just be one thing for the cloud, one thing for on-prem, one thing for another cloud. It has to be a single pane of glass, and it has to cover everything, because if you don't see it, you can't understand it.
Amazing. John, thanks very much for your time, and look forward to engaging with everyone at the event. Enjoy the event, and chat soon.
Thanks, Gary. Be well.
For your organization's network, protecting the edge is no longer simple. You have to protect multiple edges, whether that's multiple people in multiple locations, new and unknown devices from users and IoT, plus workloads in public, private, or hybrid clouds. Connectivity plus security solutions are not only difficult to manage, but also causing poor performance and a degraded user experience for the application that your enterprise relies on. It's a pain for both IT and business users, and without a unified strategy, everything is still vulnerable. Fortinet solves this problem by bringing security and networking together, creating a connected environment from the branch to the data center to the cloud edge that need protection, with network firewall, SD-WAN, SD-branch, and SASE. Securing your enterprise while improving the user experience with flexible anytime, anywhere security for any edge and any user at any scale. For today's dynamic environments, Fortinet's approach allows networks to change and grow without creating vulnerabilities at new or evolving edges. With the Fortinet platform protecting the entire digital attack surface, security and network teams are freed from a reliance on point products, automating manual tasks, simplifying operations, and lowering costs, while also creating consistent security for on-prem solutions or purpose-built cloud architecture for SASE. Edges are numerous and everywhere. You need to protect them all with Fortinet.